Hello, hello, and welcome to 2 Minutes with an Art Eater. As always, I'm your host, Kayla Quiros. I'm very excited for today's episode featuring the incredibly talented and all-around wonderful human, Telly Leung. Hi, Telly.
Hi, how are ya?
I'm great.
ARTeater. I love ARTeater.
It's awesome, yeah?
Zot zot, indeed.
We at the Claire Trevor School of the Arts are so lucky to have Telly as our special guest director of UCI'S main stage production of Rent, opening June 3rd in the Claire Trevor Theatre. For those of you who don't know, Telly has 7 Broadway credits to his name, including being in the final cast of Rent, playing the title role of Aladdin, and originating the role of Sammy in Allegiance. In addition, he has been in a handful of TV shows such as Glee, Warrior, and Law & Order. Through his career, he has worked alongside a plethora of seasoned professionals, such as the late Stephen Sondheim, Neil Patrick Harris, Vanessa Hudgens, and Lea Salonga, just to name a few. Telly has had a very fruitful career in acting, however, he also produces, directs, and creates his own music. Overall, Telly is a man of many talents, and we are beyond excited to claim him as an honorary anteater. On that note, you have a long history with Rent, through being cast in the final company on Broadway, being in the international Broadway tour, playing Angel in Rent at the Hollywood Bowl, and Rent marking your film debut via Radical Media's Sony's Rent, filmed live on Broadway. How has the show changed your life?
I think the show changed my life when I was first 16 years old and I saw the original Broadway company. Rent was the show on Broadway that created the $20 rush ticket. Because they knew that Rent was this show that was about bohemian artists. And yet, when they were moving the show uptown from New York Theater Workshop to Broadway, they knew that the show was going to be cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So they reserved the first 2 rows of the theater as what they called the Rent rush seats. And if you slept on the streets of 41st Street, which back in those days, Times Square was not as safe as it is now, you could get your $20 seat sitting in the first 2 rows of the theater on the day of the show. And I did that as a 16-year-old. I didn't really tell my parents what I was doing, that I was going to sleeping bag it on 41st Street and see Rent. But I think I did that like 15 or 16 times.
Oh my gosh.
The summer between 96 and 97. So, I mean, I was a Rent head. Like, I love the show. It was the show of my generation. So it changed my life then. And I remember 10 years later when I joined the company in 2006, the stage manager, Crystal Huntington, who was also the stage manager all the way back from like New York Theater Workshop, when she taught me the show, she was like, Telly, are you sure you've never done the show? You know this show really well. And I said to Crystal, I've been doing the show in my head for the last 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
Like there's no other show I know better than Rent. So it's just meant a lot to me. So to get to actually be part of it and to see it from this side has been great. And now to be here at UCI and to sort of pass on the show to a new generation of people is so full circle to me. It's been incredibly gratifying to be here to do that.
What is your biggest takeaway from your holistic Rent experience?
What I take away from the Rent experience overall is the people. It was an incredible group of people. And the things that you don't get to see that are part of the Rent family, we loved each other so much that like on dinner breaks between shows, we spent it in the green room. We would all get takeout and we'd play Family Feud. So we would divide ourselves into, we would have our food between shows, and we would divide ourselves between shows, and we would like play board games and Family Feud, and like we spent time that we didn't have to spend together with each other. And that's the part that like people don't see. Like when I did the Broadway tour with Anthony Rapp and Adam Pascal and so many people from that final Broadway company, like the parts you don't get to see is us rooming with each other in hotel rooms and having cast dinners every Thursday, exploring the gay bars. That's the part that I think I take away the most as my fondest memories. The show is amazing, and the show as a performer, as an artist, is always a show that's given something back to me. And I always say if Rent was still running today on Broadway, I'd still be in it. You would have to kick me out of the doors. And they did. I was there till the very last show. They literally had to kick me out of the building for me to stop doing the show. But I don't know. It's all the other stuff that's attached to it. And I think the two go hand in hand. That like we all love the show we were doing. All of us believed in the message of the show. And that show built a family. And now you all get to be part of it, right? Like now you all get to be part of the legacy and you all know what it feels like to do the show. And it's my hope that 10 years later that you talk to your castmates and you have really fond memories of, gosh, 10 years ago we did Rent. at UCI, and and that there are long-lasting connections and friendships and collaborations that come out of this.
Yeah. Why do you think Rent is an important story to be told in today's cultural/political climate?
Yeah, to me, Rent is about community, and Rent is about the power of community and coming together. I think also Rent is about seeing value in a different way, right? So in the 90s, when we looked at Rent in the context of what Rent was, we just came from the 80s, which was a time where we celebrated corporate wealth, where people aspired to being a bazillionaire, that Wall Street tycoon that had the corner office on the 75th floor of a high-rise building. There was very little value placed on things that weren't money-based. And I think Rent comes along, and here are these poor bohemian artists, and they flip people's value systems. Jonathan's message is that he forces you to measure a man not by how much money he makes, but by daylights, cups of coffee, minutes, seconds. If we think of somebody's capital and what they can spend in the world, not in monetary terms, but what if you measured it in how many people they impacted? And what if you could measure positive impact in the world? And what if that was the value placed on people? So that means many things, right? That could be the art you put into the world, which moves people. That could be the song you sing that lifts spirits. That could also just be the kind deed you do to a perfect stranger. So I think that is why Rent is important, because it's a reminder of our humanity and our collective responsibility to each other. And I think that message is more important now than ever.
In your opinion, what steps do you think Broadway needs to take to support the next generation of theatrical artists?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we're talking about Rent, right? Because Rent was the show that invented the $20 rush ticket, where the ticket prices now are such that they are inaccessible to young people who are living below a certain income level. That also plays into other socioeconomic inequalities. So are there Black and brown people going to the theater, or is it actually cost prohibitive for them to do so? There's wonderful theater happening on Broadway. And you think about how many people are not seeing it because they can't afford it. And I think part of paying it forward is figuring out a way to make really great theater accessible. I don't know what that necessarily means. Is it grants? Is it government subsidies? Is it having a national theater? Is it making the nonprofit theaters where their mission is tied to community? Is it making sure that they make theater accessible to people? Is it also decentralizing Broadway in some ways and saying there is great theater happening everywhere? There's great theater happening in regional theaters, in smaller theaters, in community theaters, at universities, putting an emphasis that theater is happening all around you and it is accessible, and going, maybe Broadway isn't the end all be all of it, Because I understand Broadway is commercial. Broadway is show business with a capital B, right? And so I understand that. It is a commercial venture, just like a show in Vegas is a commercial venture. It has to sell tickets and it has to make money, and that is the goal. But maybe we as artists say, great, if that is the goal and there is an appetite and a market for that, then where is the art happening? Where are we pushing our genre forward? And maybe it's not Broadway. Shows like Rent that do change the game and change the era, I think come once in a generation. I think you can say one show in every decade maybe does that, changes the game and really pushes what it is that we call musical theater forward to the next level of expression. Maybe those kind of revolutionary shows aren't happening on Broadway, because Broadway is becoming much more commercial. Audiences now, that is what they want, and that is what they're paying for. The Britney Spears musical, the Anne Juliettes, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I have no judgment for that.
Yeah.
But is it the place where we are going to push the art form and the genre forward? Maybe not anymore. And maybe that is happening in regional theaters. And maybe that's happening at universities. And maybe that's happening at smaller theaters. And maybe we, as artists, need to support that with our attention, with our dollars, with our social media posts, with our advocacy. Maybe that's where we need to put the focus.
On that note, what's next for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. I have no idea what's next for me, to be honest. I had a really busy year, which I'm very thankful for. I've been living out of a suitcase since July of 2022. So, July of 22, I went away to Cape Town for 4 months to film a series for HBO called Warrior. I'm on the 3rd season of that show, and it premieres at the end of June. And then I went straight to London to do Allegiance in London. And then I basically had 2 weeks to go home to New York, unpack a bag, repack a bag, and I was in California for 6 weeks. So what I'm looking forward to, honestly, is sleeping in my own bed in New York City and being on the couch and watching Netflix and seeing my friends that I haven't seen in a year in New York and my family and all that. So I think that's what's next. I'm excited for a summer of fun. You know, usually as an actor and as somebody in show business, I get very nervous when I don't know what the next job is. And for the first time, and maybe this comes with a little bit of age too, I'm 43, that I can say, you know what? If I don't have a job this summer, I am totally okay just like taking the summer off and figuring out what happens in the fall, because something always does happen. I have faith that it's going to be okay. I don't think I would have said that in my 20s. I think I was very nervous. Yeah, oh, please. You'll get there. But I think I was very nervous in my 20s about like, oh my God, I'll never work again. That job is my last. I'll never be on Broadway again. And I do think that I've had the blessing of doing 7 Broadway shows. But every time one of those shows ended, I was like, this is never going to happen again. This is it. This is the last one. I actually have a little tradition that I have, which is that at the end of every Broadway show, if it's my last show, I actually kiss the stage.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Because I go, I don't know when I'm going to ever see you again. So it's just a kiss goodbye. Because you just never know. It's a very few amount of people that can say, I've done that. I've been on Broadway.
Yeah.
And there's very few of us who get to go, I've done that several times. And I never take it for granted that it is something very special that very few people on earth will experience. So no day but today. Enjoy it. Enjoy this now.
Perfect. Now, I think it's time for speed
Oh
round.
gosh, these make me so nervous, Kayla.
You're fine.
All right, here we go.
Answer as fast as you can.
Okay.
Dream role.
The Phantom of the Opera, and now it's closed. So you'll see me. It'll be the regional theater of Phantom of the Opera somewhere, and it'll be me.
I'll be there.
Fulfilling my dream. Yeah.
Favorite Disney character?
Oh, Aladdin.
Okay,
I thought
you were gonna say that.
Yeah, of course.
If you were an animal, what animal would you be?
Really good question. A bird, because I want to fly.
What type of bird?
An eagle.
Okay. Best Broadway show of all time.
Rent. I always say that. It's not just because I'm on this podcast, but I've said it since I was 16.
What sound does an anteater make?
Oh, zot, zot, zot.
Yay!
Right?
Yes.
Thank
Zot,
you.
zot, zot.
I learned a few things here.
You have honorary anteater, Telly. Well, that's a wrap.
Oh, yay.
Thank you so much, Telly.
This was so fun.
Of course. You're awesome. Thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Again, I'm Kayla Quiros. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and zot, zot, zot.